Welcome to Don't Fear the Weight podcast with your host Vicky Masita, bringing together science and personal experience.
Hi guys, welcome back to the next episode of the Don't Fear the Weight podcast with me, your tiny titan host, Vicky Masita. And the weather is getting a little bit more sunnier, so I have decided to wear less clothes today and just go into a vest. But I can't say the same for my secondary guest host now, Andy. We've had Andy on a couple of times on Don't Fear the Weight, and I think what we're going to do is we've just agreed we're going to do a couple of these and make them a little bit more frequent. So once a month, myself and Andy are going to do a podcast. Tell you a little bit about how our training is going, how we're progressing or not progressing, what our plans are, how we're feeling, and then discuss a topic at hand for the month. So guys, this is a little bit of a throw out there. If you do have anything more sciencey based that you want us to discuss, then obviously put these in the comments or DM us on Instagram or Facebook, and then we can put these into our discussions. So good morning, Andy. You are not half undressed in a vest, so I'm assuming it's still fairly cold up there where you are. How are you getting on?
I'm doing all right, thanks. I feel like I should now remove an item of clothing just because of that comment. I'm doing okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm doing all right. It's quite nice up here as well, actually. So I think later on I'll probably be able to wear the t-shirt out and about. So as we're early in the morning though, so by lunchtime I'm sure I'll be able to cut about in this.
That's it.
Can you see my tan line actually? Can you see this?
What's that?
That's a tan line.
A tan line? Oh yeah, I saw this ridiculous farmer's tan that you had the other week when you came and saw us at the seminar. It was like, Andy, what on earth are you doing? But yeah, but that was from your strongman competition, was it not?
No, that was actually just from sitting outside in the garden like an idiot and not putting sun cream on. So I can't even attribute to it anything cool about it at all. That was just being an idiot in the garden.
That was just being a numpty, wasn't it? Yeah, exactly what you like. So tell us a little bit about your month. Obviously, we haven't had a proper catch-up on Don't Fear the Weight for probably a couple of months, haven't we? Within that time, you've done some strongman competitions?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what you're focusing on at the moment.
So let's talk about that strongman. So I did that last month, I think it was. So that was the BSNF. That's the federation, so that's British Strongman Natural Federation. I think that's the acronym, so it's something like that. It might be BNS, I don't know. So that was the Scottish qualifier that I did for that. So I did the under 90 kilogram class for that one, and I came in second place. So I did quite well there. I was pretty happy with that. Not too shabby for a bodybuilder.
Not bad.
Not often say, and I think that sort of sparked our conversation that you're interested in today that we're going to talk about, because I told you about this daft dehydration weight cut that I ended up doing off the back of that. So I did that contest. Pretty happy with how that went, and then we'll get into that, I guess, with the dehydration topic. And then after that, I've been just I took a week off of training because strongman's hard. I mean, that beats your body up something awful. When you're doing heavy yokes running around, when you're doing things like log, doing actual deadlifts, stones, things like this. I mean, they just have a toll on your body, your central nervous system, that conventional sort of training just doesn't have on you. So it's kind of like you're doing full body workouts all the time. And people often ask me what's the difference between bodybuilding and strongman training, and I would say that strongman training, every session you go into the gym, it's crushing.
Yeah.
You feel your body being compressed. So I took some time off from that just to let my body recover, and I've been back in the gym now, just training. I've been doing a lot of stuff with chains in the gym because they look really cool, but it's also because it's a really hard workout, and I've got a little bit of a niggle in the inside of my thigh that I've been just trying to train around a little bit. So it's when I'm doing things like squats and deadlifts, I'm just I'm not going quite as heavy, but putting the chains on the bars and things like that just makes sure that the intensity is still very, very high off the back of it, and allows me to train at those high intensities while lifting what are essentially lighter weights. And I mean, the injuries come about from doing the strongman training. Essentially, it's you get a niggle and then you just have to keep training around things and through things. You're only strong as your weakest muscle, I guess they say, and that little muscle on the inside there is and the adductor has been a little bit precious, and it's given me a lot of issues over the last few months from the strongman training. But
bless you. So what are you doing in terms of rehabbing that? Are you doing some acupuncture, or are you just doing that bog standard foam roll and
I've
stuff?
been getting some sports massage. I've had quite a few manual therapies on that. I spoke to my sports masseuse. He's been quite good. He suggested quite a few exercises. I did them for a while, so things with some with bands. But unfortunately, none of the stuff I was doing, and I did a little bit of research online looking for different exercises I could do, were really helping that at all. So I just stopped doing them, and I found that actually it's got a lot better just from leaving it alone, taking some anti-inflammatories. And then, I had to stop squatting really in the run up to that strongman contest, which wasn't ideal because I was doing things like yoke, and you want to keep the heavy weight on the bar. And so, I've just stopped squatting and stuff just for a period of time, and I've gone back to it now, and this is why I'm using the chains and stuff. So, like if I do 140 on the bar with a set of 20 kilogram chains, it's 180 odd, but it's not really, because when you're at the bottom of the movement, the motion's not as it's not as heavy, and when you're at the top, it's a little bit heavier. So training around it from that, but I've just been kind of leaving it alone. It's got a lot better, so hopefully I'll be able to move up past 200 over the next few weeks again and get some good weights on the bar. Hopefully, fingers
crossed. Now, I can completely agree with you. Now, obviously, I did, a lot of people know I did my rotator cuffing doing, again, this silly strongman stuff by doing a log press. So, why don't you just press your body weight above your head on a log? Why? Let's do that. So as I did that, I actually felt it go, and I felt it tear, and I just continued to press and press and press, and that's obviously what tore it completely. So I've been having a lot of therapy on it, lots of sports, couldn't overhead press for a really long time. And then I discovered acupuncture, which I have to say is life-changing. So if you really do have those niggles, acupuncture is something that I would really recommend you do, but go to somebody who actually knows what they're doing rather than just somebody who kind of goes, right, okay, I'll tap this pin and I'll tap this pin in. My acupuncture guy is, oh God, to be perfectly honest, he is a bastard, but he finds that point and he sticks that needle in and it works. So, go to a bastard, find a bastard. Okay, cool.
I used to go to a guy that used to do massage therapy for me, and he turned out, and he was like a big, heavy set guy, which is perfect if you're going to see a masseuse. And he used to wear this big apron, like he was at like a butcher's counter, because it was like a big Teflon rubbery sort of thing. I thought, who is this guy? And then he'd kick my ass for an hour. It was good, really good. I've had acupuncture before. I've done things like cupping and stuff like that. I've had variations of the acupuncture whereby they put like some electrodes on the needles, and then they turn it on, and then they slowly vibrate these needles while they're in you, and they force their way out of you. So I've done these things in the past. I'm not sure they were definitely effective or not effective. Some of these things I sort of think that I'm my own worst enemy, because any sort of massage therapy or anything like that I end up getting done, it's always to sort of maybe keep me on an even keel so things don't necessarily get any worse. So it is. Bodybuilding and exercising and training in general is all about trying to keep going forward and maintain sort of intensity. So yeah, if you want to try it out, it might work for you. Yeah,
that's it. Might as well, eh? Okay, cool. So having a look at your strongman training then, sure. We did talk about you going into a 90 kilo class.
Oh, yeah.
Now, 90 kilos is quite light for you, especially in your off season, isn't it? Because in off season, I don't know if people know about Andy's off season, but in off season, as soon as you walked off the DFAC pro stage, you were into off season, and you've got quite a good switch, isn't it? You don't have this problem with kind of like still maintaining leanness. You just want to get big and strong and get into your off season as quick as possible. Sure. So 90 kilos was quite light for you, wasn't it, from coming off stage?
Well, I would be 80 kilos on stage, so yeah.
Sorry, 80 kilos. What I meant was your off season weight.
Sure.
So where did you start in your off season weight? And then how much did you have to come down to with your strongman, and in what time period, first of all?
Okay, so if I was on stage about 80 odd kilograms, and then I was, let me think here. I got up to, I would then have a week off of just dieting, eating and things like that, because I'd be still in the States or something like this. So I'm going to go on a holiday a little bit and just enjoy myself. And this ability to switch, by the way, I should say, has come from just years of training. It's not something that's just ever came overnight. So I think that's worth bearing in mind as well, being able to do that sort of thing. Because I know some people just they haven't been able to do that themselves, or they feel they need to keep themselves in shape. But I would probably get myself up to about 90, 91 kilograms from that sort of point there, because I'm trying to lift. One of my goals is always to try and be as strong as I possibly can. And, you know, having a little bit more fat around your midsection, cushioning those joints, etc., just kind of helps you lift those heavier weights. But maybe it also helps you build up your hormones back to where they need to be again. So getting things like testosterone back where it needs to be, which obviously is a key muscle building hormone. Getting things like cortisol depressed again, which again is a sort of catabolic hormone, and then making sure that you've got enough energy coming in so that you can maintain that high training intensity. So that's coming from putting all the food back in. But I would normally get myself up to around about 90-ish kilograms from about, say, 2014, 15-ish. And then when I started doing the Strongman, well, you know what, you can imagine what the archetypal Strongman looks like. It's Eddie Hall, isn't it?
Yeah.
So these guys are not worried about the way they look. And the saying is mass moves mass. But I have been able to, as I've got stronger, I have noticed that I've been getting a little bit heavier. I don't know if it's just the fact that I'm getting older as well, and my body's changing because of that, because I'm now 31 compared to when I was like, say, 26, 27. But I'm now these days cut around about 93-ish kilograms, 94-ish kilograms. So when it came to the strongman competition that I was doing, which was the under 90 kilograms category, I mean, I'm still going around thinking that I'm this 27-year-old thinking, oh, it's fine, I'm 90 kilograms.
Yeah.
No problem at all. I'll just rock up, weigh in, and that'll be that. And then I've weighed myself on like the Monday or something like that on my scales, and I thought, 93 odd? That can't be right. Those scales are broke. Then, so I had to go into the lab in the morning on the Wednesday, the Tuesday again, and try my laboratory scales, which I know are accurate, and then I was still 90 odd 3 kilograms. So I'm like, okay, this is a bit of an issue here. I've got some weight to lose before the competition on the Sunday at that point there. So this is really our podcast topic then, isn't it? I mean, how do you get the weight off for this? So here's what I did. I mean, most of the stuff that I would do in terms of weight manipulation comes from anecdotal accounts of what you hear other people doing, my own reading around the subject for what I know about the science of terms of water manipulation, hydration, sodium, carbohydrates, etc. And then my experience as well when it comes to sort of bodybuilding dieting, and I mean the effects that a high carbohydrate, low carbohydrate diet has, what happens when it comes to carb loading, carb depleting, and so on. So I use this sort of knowledge to come up with my own sort of plan. Now, at the same time, alongside all of that, I also have a lot of experience with doing things like carbohydrate loads and carbohydrate depletes. So I know myself how my body reacts to a carbohydrate load, a carbohydrate deplete, and I know what I can get away with. So if I write a plan that says drink, just for example, 14 litres of water on one day, 12 on the next day, and 8 on the next day, I've done that before. I know what that's like, and I know that I can do that. Someone else that's coming into trying to do these sort of things, that's trying to sort of hyperhydrate so they get some polyuria, which is excess urination so that you can get rid of excess water weight. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. I would always sort of say try things out. But I was coming at this with a little bit of experience in terms of what I knew my body was going to be able to get away with.
Okay.
So here's what I guess I essentially did. So the first thing we kind of know is that carbohydrates within your muscles, so glycogen stores, are held with water. It's around about a 1-to-3 ratio, okay? So if you take, say, a 75 kilogram man, and I'm a 90 kilogram man, we know that you can lose around about 3,000 grams, so about 3 kilograms of water weight, just off the back of, say, carbohydrate depleting. If you get all that carbohydrate out of your muscle, then you can potentially lose all that excess water out of your muscle as well. Now, there's an argument to say, well, can you really ever get all that glycogen out of there? But certainly, there is obviously the ability to deplete the carbohydrate in the muscle for a start, which means a low-carb diet for a few days. Yep. Then you'll be able to get rid of some weight that way. So that's what I did. So I had 3 days of very low carbohydrate dieting, which was hellish.
I was going to say, but that felt like crap for you.
My brain didn't like it. And then at the same time, you have to realize that that carbohydrate that's in the muscle, that's staying there. Unless you do some exercise, then that carbohydrate is going nowhere, because you don't have the ability to actually transport that glycogen or that glucose in the muscle to circulate around the rest of your body. It's stuck. You don't have the enzymes. You have to do some exercise as well. And this is why carbohydrate depletion plans typically revolve around doing some sort of high intensity exercise as well, or circuits. So that's again what I did. So I did 2 days worth of sort of light training in the gym, circuits around this low carbohydrate dieting. And then on the final day of the depletion, because I would be 2 days out from the competition at that point, I didn't want to actually do any sort of weightlifting, because I mean I want to rest my muscles for the sake of the strongman contest. Even though you're doing like light stuff, you still want to have a rest, not do too much. So I just did some cardio exercise. So I was doing like 20 minutes of rowing and 20 minutes of cross trainer. That was split, by the way, because I can't row for 20 minutes.
I was going to say, Christ, Andy.
No, I would do about 2 minutes, and then I jump on the cross trainer, and then I jump back on the row for 2 minutes, because man, rowing is hard. I mean, the big thing is about gosh, I think it's for tall people. It's definitely that, and bodybuilders are short.
Yeah,
yeah,
I second that.
So I mean, this was a plan that I did. Now, one thing you notice with a low carbohydrate dieting, and this is well documented in the literature, particularly people that are coming from high carbohydrate diets, is that the rate of perceived exertion, so how hard exercise actually is, becomes much more challenging for people who are not essentially fat adapted. So even when I was doing this rowing, oh my God, I was like, I'm so tired doing this. I'm like, no way rowing is normally this hard. So turns out it is, but because I've done some since. So I did this. So I carbohydrate depleted, about 50 grams a day, carbohydrates, high protein to compensate in the meantime, a little bit higher fat, but I was still in an energy deficit for those 3 days. I drank a little bit more water, but nothing much beyond the normal amount I would have. So maybe normally drink about 4 liters a day, had about 6. So it was only a slight increase, and then did all this exercise as well. Then the day before, what I did was I increased my water intake a little bit. So I went up to 8 liters of water. So not high amounts. And then I ended up sitting in a sauna beforehand. The night before, I sort of cut the water out, and then I sat in the sauna. So I did, how long did I do? I did 35 minutes, I think, and that was split into 10-minute bouts. Okay. And I mean, that was really, really hard. I mean, especially since I cut my water, I wasn't drinking any water after that point. And I mean, you hear anecdotal stories about people being in saunas for hours. I mean, fair play to these people for being able to do that, because I was doing 10 minutes at a time and just dying, like not being able to cope it. So I'd have to come out, have a cold shower, and then jump back in. So eventually, I mean, I managed to weigh in on the day of the competition, and I think I was 88.9 or something like that. So I managed to get.
So you lost a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, I didn't want to take any chances, because I had at least 3 kilograms to lose, and then you need to be under. You can't be 90. You need to be under 90. This is a thing. So I didn't want to take any chances with just say low carb dieting. I mean, I was monitoring and seeing how much I was losing from the low carbohydrate dieting itself. I was weighing myself again and seeing that I was okay. From the 93, I got down to about the 91. So I lost about 2 kilograms, which coincides with that a little bit. What I was talking about with glycogen storage.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure that I got under the sort of weight class. If I only had like maybe 1 kilo to lose or 2 kilo to lose instead of that larger amount, then I think maybe I would have maybe opted for 1 or 2 strategies rather than doing that whole barrage of different strategies, the depleting, the HIIT training along with the circuits, and the sauna sort of stuff, and the water loading again at the same time with the restriction. But again, I've never actually had to try and make weight before. So again, this experience is something where I'll know for next time if I have to get down to this sort of weight class, then I can implement 1 or 2 of these sort of strategies. And I think that's an important point, that you've got all these tools in your toolkit to help you try and get down to the weight, but you maybe don't need to use every single one of those strategies to try and get yourself down. Because obviously when it comes to performing, I mean, something like bodybuilding is obviously slightly different from strongman, but what you're trying to do is, it is a performance related sport. So if you are more than 2% dehydrated, and I was about 4 or 5% dehydrated, then your performance is going to suffer. So as soon as I weighed in, I knew that first off, I needed to get the carbohydrate back into my muscle, and I need to get the water back into my muscle. So I drank 2 litres of Lucozade Sport, so trying to get that back in, plus another litre of water with electrolytes in it as well. I had a punnet of grapes, a couple of bananas, and then a bag of jelly babies. And that took me up to about 3 hours after the weigh-in. So I smashed loads of carbs, but I tell you, at that point, I mean, I was still dehydrated for the actual weigh-in of the competition itself. And there's no doubt that for the first 2 events, I was still suffering. I wasn't fully back to where I needed to be if I'd just actually been 90 kilograms in the first place. I think I probably would have performed better, but I can have no complaints. Like, I mean, I did quite well. And then your man Gerard, who managed to beat me, I mean, great competitor. He lifted that 167 stone, which is a stone I've never lifted. So, I mean, fair play to him. He deserves it all day. So no excuses. Yeah. So yeah, that's my plan. If you go on the my Facebook page, Andrew Chappell Natural Bodybuilding, I've documented that plan on a nice little table, so you'll be able to see it step by step exactly what I did. If you want to try and take little bits of that itself, it maybe looks a little bit better when it's written down rather than me sort of speaking through the plan.
For sure.
So, how does that sound to you then, Vicky?
Yeah, well, it sounds absolutely disgusting, to be perfectly honest with you.
I wouldn't recommend it.
No, absolutely not. I wouldn't recommend all of that. Now, I've obviously heard of all of these depletion strategies because bodybuilders use glycogen depletion and glycogen depletion circuits in order to have this super compensation effect so that when they do deplete all of their glycogen and they whack in a load of carb loading back end of the week, they obviously tend to fill out their muscles and things like that. So in terms of let's have a chat about it for how bodybuilders use dehydration strategies, because like you just said there, the water that people are taking in, their muscle obviously holds onto that water as well. So why are bodybuilders wanting to dehydrate before they got on stage, and what are the realistic detrimental effects that can cause to their overall aesthetic look before getting on stage?
Okay, so I mean, this is a bit of a controversial area, really. I mean, first off, I would say not every sort of competitor is going to be doing these sort of strategies, and not every competitor should be doing these sort of strategies. I mean, we've got different, it's particularly when we move into the female divisions, when we've got things like a bikini or toned figure, etc., whereby the look is not, there's not a demand to have a super hard, dehydrated, vascular sort of appearance to the physique. So it's very specific to bodybuilding. And if you look at the literature on this, I think Helmsley's paper with Aragon and, is it Peter Fishnich? What's his second name?
Peter Fishin.
Peter Fishin. I mean, they sort of point out that probably, well, I think they were very cautious. I think they did not recommend sort of peaking strategies, and I think they sort of just towed the line that there's not really much out there on this, so they should be avoided. And I know if you look at someone like Lane Norton, he's sort of got this similar sort of approach that your muscle is predominantly made up of water, and the more muscular you are, the more water you are made up of water as well. But he's sort of one that suggests that you should perhaps avoid these sort of strategies as well. And I think that's a perfectly sort of reasonable thing to sort of say. However, when we look anecdotally at this, there's definitely an acknowledgement amongst the bodybuilding culture that manipulating sodium, manipulating fluids, and manipulating carbohydrates or other macronutrients can have a profound effect on the way your physique looks. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you look at people who are getting ready for photo shoots and things like this. I mean, even these people will do things in terms of manipulating those variables to get a change in their appearance. So there's no doubt you can manipulate things, and this will change how you potentially look, for the better or for the worse, I should actually say. Now, some research I'm undertaking just now, where I've surveyed bodybuilders, so I've got a cohort of about 80 of them. The vast majority of bodybuilders are implementing at least some sort of peaking strategy. So most people are actually doing something. Now, that means that they're either probably manipulating water in terms of water loading or water depleting. They are manipulating carbohydrates in terms of loading and depleting, manipulating electrolytes in terms of sodium loading and sodium depleting. And then there's a host of other things that they're actually potentially doing as well. I would say not all those strategies they're doing them mutually. Some of them are just doing these things exclusively, like they might just be water loading themselves, they might just be water depleting themselves, etc., or they might just be carbohydrate loading. without water depleting and water loading. And then some people are doing the whole gamut of different sort of strategies in a row. So what you said earlier on, yeah, is absolutely right. So what's happening is people, they carbohydrate deplete. It's probably very similar to what's described in the literature as classical carbohydrate loading, but used for endurance events. So 3 days or 4 days of low carbohydrate diet, so ketogenic, about 50 grams a day or less, some people will do. And then you whack in a walloping great load of carbohydrates thereafter. Front loading strategies are the most popular. So putting in most of the carbohydrates in the first day, a reduced amount the second day, and then again a lower amount again the third day. Okay, and it's this idea of supercompensation, and we know this works. So we know that you can store more carbohydrate in your muscle cell than you would normally be able to store following these sort of strategies. Now, some of the debates in the literature just now around this relating to carbohydrate loading center around the fact that, first off, do you need to do that depletion stage? So do you need to do those 3 or 4 days depletion first and foremost, or can you just throw in all those carbohydrates and still get the same effect? And then there are other sort of techniques which are centered around this sort of 1 day loading strategy. So rather than doing 3 days worth of loading, maybe you can just do some high intensity exercise that will make your muscle cells more responsive to taking up glucose and storing it as glycogen. And then after that, you whacking up whopping great load of carbohydrates. So there's maybe more than one way to sort of do this as well, it seems, but certainly the predominant strategy seems to be carbohydrate depleting, carbohydrate loading, and then water loading with a taper in it as well, which takes us all the way in a round circle to the question about the water depleting sort of phase here. So I've mentioned this already. We're looking at around about 1 to 2.7. I think if you look in the literature, as a ratio of water to glucose. So you need about 2.7 mils maybe of water to store your 1 gram of carbohydrate. So if you do a large carbohydrate load, say 1,000 grams, then you need to have at least 2.7 liters of water to coincide with the storage as well. There's also water though that's required just in the digestion process. So you need a little bit of water there as well. So maybe you need a little bit more, and then coinciding with that, people will practice water loading strategies with this emphasis on polyuria, as I was talking about earlier on. So you put in extra water just in case, so you've got enough water to store the carbohydrate. You then drink extra water just because you're trying to create polyuria. And then obviously you've got a demand for water throughout the day anyway, don't you? Because we might all need 4 or 5 water. So you've got all that additional water. Now, obviously that water doesn't need to be on the second day when the carbohydrate comes down. And then by the third day again, when the carbohydrate comes down again, the water doesn't need to be as high as well. Now that third day usually coincides with the day before the competition. So what we know about supercompensation theory is with glycogen is that once you get the carbohydrate in the muscle, you can kind of hold on to it for around about 2 days, yeah? Okay. So those first 2 days, you're just chucking all the carbohydrate in there, and you can kind of hold on to that, yeah? Then the next few days, what you're doing is you're essentially trying to keep that carbohydrate in the muscle. So the day before the comp, everything that you're eating is trying to make sure that you're trying to keep that carbohydrate, and then on the day of the competition itself, you've got all that stored carbohydrate, it's in the muscle, it's stored there already with the water because it's not going anywhere. And that's the idea, that if it's in there already, then you're not going to liberate that water that's stored with the carbohydrate. And then the goal is to try and get rid of any extracellular water that might be still within the system, yeah? And I guess this is where people will start to bring in arguments which are related to, okay, well, if you try and deplete your water, then you start to release hormones like angiotensin, renin, aldosterone, things like this. And these are hormones which will cause you to hold on to electrolytes, if you like. And I think we all sort of appreciate that large salt doses, etc., are sort of things that tend to make you hold water. So you get things like edema, so swelling and things like this off the back of it. So that's what people are doing. But at the same time, they're also taking things like diuretics. So they're taking herbal diuretics. They're taking vitamin supplements as diuretics. We know about vitamin C, for example, that if you take a whopping great dose of this stuff, then you can cause yourself again to excrete a whole load amount, and this will cause you obviously to deplete yourself as well. B vitamins as well. I mean, we've all had sugar puffs, and you see what colour it turns your pee. So I see you just taking a drink there.
I know, I won't nearly actually spat that out. It was very funny.
Sorry about that. But again, it's something that people use again as a potential diuretic in there as well. I mean, these are water-soluble vitamins, so I mean, there's not any great danger of overdosing on these unless you're starting to take amounts in the 10, 20 gram amounts. And I would caution against taking too much. And obviously, it's scaled for body sizes as well. So that's the plan, yeah. So you've hopefully kept the volume in the muscle by virtue of the fact that you've got those extra carbohydrates in the muscle as well, and those carbohydrates are not going anywhere because they're stored with the water, yeah. So that's the idea, and anything else that's left is you're just trying to displace with all this excess vitamin C, water depleting as well at the same time, but that initial hyperhydration that you had as well. So most people stop water maybe about 12 to 16 hours before the competition. So they drink those whopping great doses beforehand, and then they just turn off the tap, yeah? And then they're obviously still excreting at that point there. So that's the idea. Then on the day of the competition, you've got this water restriction is often common as well. So people, again, they are they're restricting water, so they're not drinking any fluids until they end up on stage, or they're keeping it to things like sips. Now, people eat food as well, so it's worth remembering that there are still fluids in water. So it's not complete restriction. I mean, a potato, for example, is worth around about 80% water. So if you eat 500 grams of potato, then 80% of that is actually going to be water as well. So there is an argument to say that, okay, well, you're not fully depleting yourself of water because you're doing these sort of things as well. But then again, that extra water is needed there to process that carbohydrate that's going through your body as well. So this is the idea, yeah. I think I've done a lot of explaining the process. I'm not sure I've entirely answered your question, or maybe I've touched on a few points around this. Dangers you were talking about?
Yeah.
So I guess if you haven't got a coherent strategy, so if you've not got all those different elements in place and you just try to potentially restrict water, and you've been hyperhydrating, then restricting water, but you've not put all those carbohydrates in your muscle in the first place, then you're probably more likely to have that flat look that's going to be attributed to the muscle. So you've not got anything in there, the carbohydrate in the muscle, holding the water in the first place. If you hyperhydrate, then there's hypernatremia.
Yep.
And hyponatremia, so maybe you end up having loss of excess electrolytes, or maybe you end up having a thickening of the blood off the back of this, and you end up with higher blood pressure than you otherwise would like to have, or you end up with extremely low blood pressure when you otherwise you would like to have low blood pressure, obviously, off the back of this. Now, you're probably getting into the realms of those sort of conditions when you're sort of looking at diuretics in that respect. But in extreme cases, I mean, we can talk about things like stroke, cardiac arrest, paralysis. I mean, really more of a danger when we're moving into that sort of diuretic use side of things, when you're moving into the other sort of the darker side of the sport, if you like, when people are dabbling in the dark arts. But yeah, there are certainly dangers associated with these things as well. I mean, certainly sodium loading is a very popular strategy, and I think people try to salvage, or people can use sodium loading strategies potentially to salvage a potential flat look, because most of the sodium that you have in your body is held extracellularly, and most of the other main electrolytes, maybe potassium, for example, these are intracellularly, yeah? So what you're doing, I mean, we know that sodium is something that tends to be held with water, so if you whack in a whole lot of sodium, maybe you can push some of that water back into the intracellular space. However, these processes are very tightly regulated, so any sort of sodium potassium manipulation like that is likely to be sort of an acute effect, yeah? So it maybe could work I mean, people do these strategies, and they obviously can have an effect on them. Otherwise, they wouldn't employ such strategies from an anecdotal effect. But they're probably more likely, they are likely to be short-lived. So their application in other sports, which aren't based on physique, how the physique looks, there's maybe not necessarily an application. So there's lots of different little strategies that you can use there, and you can see how you could potentially even use something like sodium loading along with the carbohydrate loading and carbohydrate depleting, water loading, water depleting strategies that coincide with those strategies as well.
For sure. So this was obviously what we've just discussed here is all to do with the aesthetic looks of bodybuilders. Now, in order to make weight, so say for example, a power lifter, a lot of power lifters, they need all of that energy and all of that carbohydrate and all of that fat in order to progress their lifts for their particular off season, getting ready to compete. But then they need to make weight.
Yep.
So this is a fine balance. Now, what you can do for people who are powerlifting and they have to weigh in, say, the morning of the meet, say they weigh in at 7 a.m., but then they're not actually going to be starting to lift until 11. Could they potentially do exactly the same thing that you described as your, like you've just described?
Strongman stuff, yeah.
Yeah. So could they potentially do that and then whack in a load of Lucozade and whack in a load of water and things like that before they go into their lifts and still not detriment the energy system? Because with powerlifting, you're realistically only doing 9 lifts, aren't you? It's not a big strongman event like we were talking about previously.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the demand from the it's glycolysis is largely what you're utilizing when you're taking part in something like in strongman. So it's that real lactic acid energy system, whereas the powerlifting, the focus is perhaps more on the those ATP, phosphate, creatine sort of stores. So that 10, 12 seconds sort of burst. Although some judges might be mean and make them lock out for and hold things for much longer. Well, I know from laboratory trials on this that if you're around about 3% dehydrated, then you can recover it with around about a 3-hour weigh-in. Yeah. Okay. So you can kind of get it back. Yeah. So as long as you can get hydrated again, then you'll probably be okay, and then that'll have no detrimental effect on performance. Because we know that even around about 2% dehydrated, that people are not performing quite as well as they otherwise should perform, which is why hydration is obviously a very important strategy for any athlete. When we start to move beyond the 3% mark, and we start looking at 4, 5, 6% dehydration, we're seeing that people can struggle to be they can struggle to be hydrated again and back to where they need to be, even after around about 15 hours.
Wow.
Of recovery. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm only quoting literature reports from people studying things in laboratories. Yeah. I'm perfectly willing to accept and believe that there are cases of individuals who are, again, practicing this sort of stuff, more used to this sort of stuff, that can recover much better than our other individuals. Because we're only ever quoting sort of means, not values on it. But certainly, yeah, you could employ these sort of strategies if you wanted to get yourself in down to weight in the sort of the powerlifting competition or whatever the event you're going to do. But you have to be aware that you might not be able to be as hydrated as you might be, and it might have a detrimental effect on the performance. And then it becomes a discussion probably with your coach or with your friends or whoever your peer groups. Is it worth being that little bit under 100% in terms of performance, but being a little bit heavier than your peers, because that still might give you that competitive advantage over the rest of the competition? For sure. And it might do. So I mean, and these are always discussions that that you're going to be able to have, and these are always the discussions when it comes to things like weight class sports and combat sports, things like this, fighting sports. That is it better to be just that little bit heavier but not be 100% when you can potentially be more powerful than your opponent? Yeah. Although in those sort of sports it becomes a bit of a mockery, because everyone's dropping weight and then everyone's gaining weight, so it just seems like, well, maybe you should fight at that weight. Yeah,
absolutely right.
You know what I mean? So yeah, does that answer your question on that about
definitely
being able to be rehydrated? I should mention there's a really nice paper on this. It's from Louise Burke. She's from the Australian Institute of Sport. I think I've mentioned her before. So yes. It's the first author's a chap called Reed Reel, I think it is, and the title of the paper is called acute weight loss strategies for combat sports and application to Olympic success. And they put a really nice, there's a really nice flow diagram in place which talks you through the different steps of, is the athlete more than 5% over the weight class limit or 10% over the weight class limit? How much time have they got to lose weight for the competition? Is it a week? Is it more than a week? And their idea is that, well, if a male around about 5% body fat, or a female around about 10-12% body fat, and you can't lose any more weight in that respect, then you should maybe be thinking about moving up a weight class, and rather than practicing these other sort of strategies. Contrary, if you are not doing it 5% or not doing it 10 or 12%, and you need to be making weight, then their sort of advice is, well, maybe you should be thinking about losing a little bit of fat on your body before you actually think about employing these sort of strategies as well. Sure. So but again, that's a conversation that people will have with coaches and stuff like that. I mean, there's different wisdom in different sports, and whereby maybe it is better to actually be that little bit heavier like strongman, but not be doing it those low body fat percentages. Probably similarly for the powerlifting, etc. from there as well. But a really nice paper that, again, where I was getting these sort of facts on dehydration, how much you can recover, etc., are coming from this sort of source here.
Fab. So what I'll do is I'll link that paper as well.
Yeah, sure. I'll send you. Really nice.
So if people do want to read that, then obviously we can do. So guys, I'm just thinking that we are coming up on time here. So again, I know it's gone quick, hasn't it? We just tend to ramble a lot, and then all of a sudden it's an hour gone by, but it is good. So just reiterating, guys, we are going to be doing one of these once a month. So if you do have any particular sciencey facts that you want to know a little bit more about, Andy is the guy to go for this. He likes his papers. He's very, very good with linking these papers as well. I'm just here to host stuff and, spit my coffee out when he makes me giggle and things.
No, not at all, Vicky. Not at all. We're all keen on hearing your perspective on this. As a practitioner, I think it's very important to get your perspective on this sort of stuff. So I only ever come at these from like a science-based angle. I'm interested in the papers and what the science of all this sort of stuff is, and does it work or not. But as I've been alluding to in this sort of podcast here, there's a lot of things that people are doing that, okay, scientists are saying maybe you shouldn't be doing this, but people are doing these practices because obviously they have an effect. So there is the room for the practitioner and sharing their experience. I mean, what do you think? I mean, have you worked with different athletes in terms of carbohydrate loading, carbohydrate depleting? Do you think that different athletes would benefit or not benefit from it?
Yes, absolutely. So I just had one of my girls, actually, she went through a contest prep and then decided not to compete. I spoke to you about it, actually, not so long ago.
Yeah, I recall, yeah.
We ended up doing a photo shoot instead, and I didn't use dehydration strategies with her because I just thought there was absolutely no need to, especially for photo shoots. However, what I did do was that I gradually fed her up into her photo shoot. So from the Monday, I just gradually started increasing her carbohydrates by 30 grams every single day, because for her, that worked a lot better. I mean, I worked with her in the off season, so we were working together for a good 12 months. I knew exactly how her body worked. And for her, whacking in a load of carbohydrates after depleting just would not have worked for her. She would have filled up with water. She would have looked very, very puffy, and she would have retained. So what we did with her was that we kept her carbohydrates and her calories very consistent until the week of the actual photo shoot. And then from the Monday, we just increased it by 30 grams every single day. She checked in with me every morning, every afternoon, and every tea time, so I could see her body and how it changed throughout the day. Because that's the other thing that people don't actually understand, is that their body changes every hour almost, when you start feeding it these carbohydrates, and everybody responds differently. You could look absolutely immense first thing in the morning, maybe just a little bit flat, but you could look really good. And then by 8 o'clock at night, you could be really watery and take a long time to get rid of that. So again, this is what people need to kind of think of about times of competing on stage. So if you're on stage at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, make sure you know what you look like at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If you train at 6 o'clock at night and you think, oh, great, I look fantastic at 6 o'clock at night, but you look shit at 2 o'clock, that's something that you're going to have to weigh up. and then have a look at the strategy that you're going to use whilst you get onto stage, because you might look flat and not have enough carbohydrates in your system by 2 o'clock, whereas 6 o'clock you've got a load of carbohydrates, you've got a pump, and you look great. So that's another thing that people need to consider as well. Dehydration strategies, I don't like using them, if I'm honest with you. I really don't, especially for bodybuilders. Making weight for powerlifters, I had a powerlifter who competed a couple of weeks ago now, and we just basically made her make weight by manipulating her food throughout, and she needed to lose 3 kilos. We lost 3 kilos over the course of 8 weeks. She never lost any strength, and she won her category and won her class in powerlifting without any silly dehydration protocols, and did very, very well. And that was
by the way, Vicky, that would be my preferred option for someone who's competing in a strength sport as well. I mean, people wouldn't be able to see this who are or maybe just listening to the audio, but I mean, I'm just nodding away at all the sort of things that you were saying there as you were going along. One thing I forgot to mention is when it comes to making weight, depleting, loading, etc., is that a reduction in fibrous carbohydrates is something that often we recommend that people do. Certainly, Real recommends that people do, because when you have a whole bolus load of fibre, you get bloating, obviously, for one fact, that it causes you to hold a little bit of water as well. So a reduction in those fibrous carbohydrates as well. And I think you're touching on like important points here about, I mean, it's cliche to say it, but knowing someone's body and understanding and how the individual responds to a certain situation. And that's the real sort of key, I guess, about being a practitioner, is not taking necessarily this paint by numbers approach and trying to individualize the nutritional plan for the actual individual, and knowing what they're able to cope with in terms of where they are in their life, where they are in their contest preparation experience, training cycle, etc. with all of this. I mean, really important points. I should mention the carbohydrate loading plans. I mean, we're looking at around about 12 grams per kilogram of body weight of carbohydrate day 1 to around about 15, around about 8 or 9 the second day. So huge, whopping great amounts if you look at super compensation strategies compared to your 30 gram amount that you're adding in. I mean, you could do the sums on that and see what it would work out with your particular client. And I know another competitor, Daz Loxton, a really experienced guy, and he does exactly what you mentioned there. Actually, he knows that he looks quite well around about the evening thing of the bodybuilding competition, so he just gets up at 4 or 5 in the morning and eats all his food like he normally would do in today, so he's ready to look as good as he can in the morning session, which would otherwise be an evening session.
Yeah.
And that seems to work really well for him. So, I mean, I'm not going to say it's wrong or anything like that, because he's found something that's definitely worked for him. Seems reasonable. And I mean, it is evidence-based, because he has practiced this out on himself. So there is evidence in himself that it kind of works. For
sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's good. It's a good mix between evidence-based and anecdotal-based experience, isn't it? So you have to combine the two. You know, just like we were saying, it can't just be science and it can't just be experience. You've got to combine the two in order to get the best package. So I think that's why we make a good package, because you're science and I'm anecdotal. I'm certainly not sciencey, but you know, I can be labbing.
You do yourself a discredit to understand this stuff.
That's it. All right, my lovely. Well, listen, we're just coming up on time here. So, guys, if you've got any questions for myself or for Andy, then please comment on it or send us a DM on Instagram, and we will make sure that we get back to you as soon as possible. And if not, we shall speak to you again next month on the next episode of Don't Fear the Weight with another update and another scientific topic. All right, so that's it from me. It from Andy. Take care. See you soon.